Hello, my name's Gavin. This is Genre Books, and if you can notice the empty shelf there, it's the indication that it's another bookshelf excavation on a Thursday. As a self-indulgent exercise, they're quite helpful in knowing which books are where. It's nice that some other people seem to enjoy it. I'm not entirely sure why. It's just holding up book after book after book, many of which I've not read, beginning with a few Philip K. Dick books. That is A Handful of Darkness. So this is a collection of short stories. Is that a Chris Foss cover? That looks like it should be a Colin Hay cover illustration. And The Zap Gun, this time a cover by Peter Jones. And finally, the Man in the High Castle. This is a more modern edition. It's got a nice embossed pattern on the front, and continuing to the back. I don't know if this says anything in Braille, but it's an interesting way of presenting the book. Not entirely to my taste. I think modern covers are just a tad boring. And of course, the Philip K. Dick is next to one of my Charles Dickens books, and this is the Christmas Books Volume 2. Now, I have read The Cricket on the Hearth, but I have not read the other two books in this collection, so maybe one to remember that I have come December, and it's always nice to read a couple of Christmas stories around that time, obviously. A selection of Gordon R Dixon now, beginning with The Genetic General in the smaller version of the Ace paperbacks, although this version is complete and unabridged. He is best known for his D'Orsay books, and this is D'Orsay adjacent. So this general is a character in those books, and here he is in one of his own stories. Tor Science Fiction now printing The Stranger, and this is, as you can see, a remaindered book, the hole punch in the front cover. Don't know anything about this one, but Gordon R. Dixon's good, so I will be giving it a shot. The next one is also Tor Science Fiction, and this is The Man from Earth. I'm not sure I enjoy these sort of 80s covers quite as much as the 70s and 60s, but they're still interesting, and it's a nice sort of use of perspective there with the reflection in the astronaut's helmet. Following on from a couple of Tor Science Fictions to a couple printed in Sphere Science Fiction, and these are the first two books of the D'Orsay trilogy, Tactics of Mistake and Soldier Ask Not. A science fiction anthology with Future Quest, edited by Roger Elwood. So big bold colours there. This is, I'm going to guess, late 70s, early 80s. Oh, I'm off. That's actually early 70s, 73. But this has stories by Anne McCaffrey, Chad Oliver, Barry Meldsberg, Paul Anderson, C.L. Grant, Mac Reynolds, Tom Purdom, and Raymond F. Jones. Confession time. Here is a science fiction author who is universally recognised as being quite good, and I've only read the one book by him, and that's Thomas M Disch. So here are some books by him I have not read. 334, The Genocides, and an anthology edited by him, The Ruins of Earth. So this looks to have some big names in it. Man is at last waking up to the terrible damage he is inflicting on his environment. The various routes to disaster have already been charted, but the damage still goes on. This collection of stories by leading science fiction writers, each committed to a human vision of society attempts to take the ecological inquiry one stage further, to indicate why we are destroying our world and what the possible consequences for us all may be. So there are a lot of contributors here. So edited highlights would be Kurt Vonnegut Jr., Gene Wolfe, Philip K. Dick, Harry Harrison, R. A. Lafferty, J.G. Ballard, Disch himself, and Fritz Leiber. But there's also some names in there that I don't recognise, and I'm all about reading books about the end of the world, so that's why I picked this one up. When I was much younger, I went through a phase of reading everything I could get by this guy, and it's J.P. Donleavy. I have not read this one yet, A Fairytale of New York. But I think the list of books by him I've not read must be quite small. There's The Ginger Man, The Singular Man, The Onion Eaters, The Beastly Beatitudes of Balthazar B., D. Alphonse Tennis. It's a long list, and they're very idiosyncratic books. I read them when I was quite young. I'm probably missing a whole layer of understanding if I were to go back to them now. At the time, they're just funny, they're farcical. I don't know whether I might have been missing the entire point, but I did enjoy them, and I'll take that. And another novel where I got it all wrong, Stephen Donaldson. So when I was younger, I tried reading the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. I think I got to the end of the first book and didn't progress any further. And I think that it's probably because I couldn't get hold of the next book in the series. But I ended up reading, and distinctly remember reading from the library because they were big old hardbacks. His series, I think it's either called A Mirror of Her Dreams or Mordaunt's Need, or those are the two books in the series. And he is a writer that I will have to, again, make time for. But here is a book I've probably got less excuse not to read, because it isn't some huge series. It's a collection of his short stories. It's Daughter of Regals. And here's one of those books I wonder about. I got it in a job lot of books. I don't know the author. It's part 4 of a series. This is a call for information. Does anyone know if Dave Duncan is any good? The cover, it's a 90s cover. It doesn't bode well. But it's in Del Rey. Just because I've not heard of a fantasy author or series doesn't mean it isn't good, and I shouldn't be judging books by their covers. Let's face it, I think there's a saying. I'm trying hard not to judge it by the blurb on the back, which is a little bit purple. I'm trying not to judge the fact that it says first time in print, because I've got plenty of great books where they didn't have a hard copy release. Maybe I'll just have to keep a lookout for the other 3 books in this series. I've absolutely no idea where I'm going to find them. I've absolutely no idea whether this is the last book in the series as well. So I don't know what I might be getting myself into. Pretty much the same goes for this next book as well. This is volume 3 in Le Cabal, The Evangelist by Saul Dunn. Though I'm getting better vibes about the cover. It says in a series, but is this something where I'm going to have to have read the other books? Again, anyone knows about this, I'm happy to learn. I'd also be interested to know if Gerald Darl is a name that is familiar to anyone from the States. He's familiar in this country, less so now than in previous years, but there seems to be a fairly steady stream of adaptations of his most famous work, My Family and Other Animals. But this is much more of a travelogue, and I think this is him going to South America. This is the Drunken Forest. And Gerald's brother, Laurence, Prospero's Cell. This is his book about Corfu. Another Ballantine fantasy, but this time not from the 90s, but from the late 70s. This is The Web of Wizardry by Juanita Coulson. Not a name I'm familiar with, but again, Del Rey fantasy, and heartened by the fact that it isn't proclaiming that it is volume 3, 4 or 5 of any long-running series. Ace fantasy now, and Dan Crawford, A Wild Dog and Lone. This is part of a series. Again, I'm not sure whether it's one I'm going to have needed to have read the previous 2 books. So one again for further research before I decide what to do with it. This next one is Del Rey Discovery, and in science fiction, Michelle Shirey Crean's Dancer of the Sixth. Don't know much about, or don't know anything about this, but I was briefly looking at the introduction to it, and it has a fairly unique dedication. I mean, I've seen books dedicated to everybody, to long dead authors, to alive authors, mentors, to family members. This one just says, this one's for me. And 2 books by Julie E. Czerrneda. So they are books from 2 different series, but one of them is the first book in the series. So I am going to read this one and see whether I like the writing. This is The Beholder's Eye, volume 1 of the Web Shifters. So this is from 1998, so it's got some sort of later cyberpunk feel to it, and this is in Door science fiction. And also To Trade the Stars. This is volume 3 of the Trade Pact universe. So I will be looking at the other book first. If I like it, I might get the first 2 volumes of this series and continue. A name that's probably a little more familiar to anyone with an interest in science fiction, and it is Haren Ellison. This is Approaching Oblivion, a collection of his short stories, and an anthology that he edited of other people's stories, and probably one of the most famous anthologies in science fiction, Dangerous Visions. This is Dangerous Visions 1. This is the Sphere reprint with fantastic cover, and Dangerous Visions 2. So I'll give you some of the authors represented in these 2 books, and it is a roll call of the great and the good of science fiction. So we have Haren Ellison, Lester Del Rey, Robert Silverberg, Fred Pohl, Philip Jose Farmer, Miriam Allen DeFord, Robert Bloch, Brian Aldiss, Howard Rodman, Philip K. Dick again, Larry Niven, Fritz Leiber, Joe L. Hensley, Paul Anderson, David R. Bunch, James Cross, Carol Emswiller, and Damon Knight. Another writer that I have spoken about on previous videos, and it is Gardner F. Fox, a man probably more famous for his comic work than for his books, but started in the pulps, as you'd expect. His Cyric books are very much in the John Carter of Mars frame, and this looks to be very much Conan the Barbarian rip-off. It's Kofar the Mighty Barbarian, but if his previous work that I've read is anything to go by, this is going to zip along and it's going to be a lot of fun. The first book in a trilogy from ElBrag The Camp. This is The Goblin Tower. And more ElBrag The Camp, this time in this McFadden books. Yes, McFadden Bartel, The Tower of Zanid. So another publisher he's working for, and another tower, but still the old same ElBrag. From Pyramid Science Fiction, 1970, ElBrag The Camp again, The Reluctant Shaman, and Other Tales. I love these pyramid book covers from the late 60s, early 70s. They are something else. And one more De Camp for the moment, and that is The Great Fetish. Mid-60s, ace science fiction, and verging, by the looks of it, on fantasy. It's Avram Davidson's Rogue Dragon. Bayan science fiction from this century with John Dalmas and the Puppet Master. Mid-80s portal fantasy. This is a sequel again. Pamela Dean, The Hidden Land. So look, yeah, portal fantasy, because you got the mix there of the unicorn and the telephone. Another fantasy sequel, and this is John DeChanty's Castle for Rent. Oh, fantasy comedy. I mean, obviously, you've got Terry Pratchett. And I remember reading some Robert Aspirin. But the world of fantasy comedy is, I think, fraught with Pratchett imitators. I don't think DeChanty is one of those. This is 1989. It's ace science fiction. I'm going to give it a go. I'm not sure I need to have read the previous book. I do worry about humour in genre fiction. Not that I don't enjoy humour, it's just that so much is not funny. So let's not prejudge John DeChanty. A couple more Avram Davidson now, from Pyramid Books, Mutiny in Space. And I've noticed, looking at the back, here is a book I really want to get. I had no idea Theodore Sturgeon wrote this. But he did the novelisation of A Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And The Phoenix and the Mirror, a fantasy book from Ace, from, again, I think, the 60s. 1969, only just. And a book that I think was on my first ever video when I did a book haul, and that is Angela Davis, If They Come in the Morning. Now, there's not much in here that's written by Angela Davis, if anything. This is a book published by her lawyers, and she was a political prisoner to some, and probably something much worse to others. But we have contributions here from, I'll be honest, a bunch of people I've not heard of, and James Baldwin, who I definitely have heard of. And, you know, they start with an open letter to Angela Davis from James Baldwin. And, yeah, you'd want to start with your best player, and James Baldwin, I think, is always going to be your best player. Some up-to-date, some modern science fiction now. Matthew de Abertua's If Then. I hope I'm not mangling his name too badly. 60s science fiction collection from Lester Del Rey. In Ace Books, the first edition of Babel 17 by Samuel R. Delany. A book that I have read and is excellent. A couple more Philip K. Dick books. Our Friends from Frolics 8 and The Turning Wheel and Other Stories. Mid-80s fantasy, this is from Del Rey, and The Sword of Calandra by Susan Dexter. Not entirely sure what's going on with that cover. But yeah, not a name I'm familiar with, so anyone knows about Susan Dexter, please let me know. So here's a tongue twister for you. Sturgeon's Starshine from Sphere Science Fiction. That's another great cover. Sturgeon's most famous novel, and this is in the Corgi SF Collector's Library, More Than Human. Late 80s science fiction now from Legend, which is a publisher I'm not very familiar with, and that is Christopher Rowley, and Golden Sunlands. And 2 books from a series which I'm interested to read, but I think I'm going to have to find some time to do so. They are spoken a lot about on BookTube, in certain parts of BookTube, and much lauded, but people seem to be intimidated by it, and that is the Malazan books. So here is Stephen Erickson's Gardens of the Moon and House of Chains. I don't know if it's necessary to write books quite so. I mean, this is over 1,000 pages. What about this one? Well, this is only 724 pages, so this is a pamphlet in comparison, but that's still a lot of detail to go into the beginning of a series. And I'm still a bit of a fan of the old fat fantasy books, but I suppose I've read so many in the last couple of years where people have got their ideas across in 160 pages or less, that I do wonder whether over 1,000 pages is strictly necessary. But I haven't read them, so I'm not going to pass judgment. And in this final stretch, there's a fair few hardbacks, so not something I've had that many of so far in this little sub-series. We begin with The Norse Myths, A Guide to Gods and Heroes by Caroline Larrington. From 1989, Gene Wolfe, Soldier of Eret. And a first edition from autumn of 1945, so must have been in production as the Second World War was ending, and that is Wars I Have Seen by Gertrude Stein. Cover is just about holding together. I will have to... it's getting a bit brittle at the bottom and the top of the spine. I'm going to have to, at some point, see what I can do to try to preserve this. But lovely cover by Cecil Beaton, which goes all around. This is a difficult book, and I have not finished it yet. But even once I have finished it, it's a little bit too nice and important to be going out into the garage and festering there. Another 1989 hardback, and this is Scholars and Soldiers from Mary Gentle. From 1988, Unicorn Mountain by Michael Bishop, and this is, if I remember correctly, a signed edition. Luna Park from Bret Easton Ellis. So this is an ex-library book. It's probably seen better days. I've not read this one. I've read a few by Bret Easton Ellis. So Lesson Zero, The Rules of Attraction, American Psycho, and Glamorama. I've not read this one. So I mostly enjoy his work. So I will look forward to reading this. I don't think I've read this next book, but Strange Days Indeed by Francis Wheen, the 1970s golden age of paranoia. So, yeah, non-fiction, but it's, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to get stuck into. Literary biography now with Like a Fiery Elephant, a book about B.S. Johnson, written by Jonathan Coe. A Paul Auster I've not read, so I sort of want to save the Paul Austers that I've not read now, because there aren't going to be any more. But the Book of Illusions. More Jonathan Coe now, and Bourneville, and again, yep, that's a signed copy. And another Jonathan Coe, The Rain Before It Falls, and not only signed, but to my wife and me, we went to see him give a talk. So this must be a good 20 years ago now, maybe. It was in London, upstairs at a Waterstones, and yeah, what a nice, engaging man. Next up, and the last of the hardbacks for the moment, A Hunter's Sketches. Stephen King and The Gunslinger. So I've not read any of the Dark Tower series, and I saw this for £1 at a charity shop. I thought, well, I'll give it a go and see if it's going to be worth reading the remaining 18 million books in the series. Con artists, burglars, rogues and scoundrels from the time of Sherlock Holmes. Edited by Michael Sims. This is the Penguin book of Gaslight Crime. So it includes stories by Grant Allen, Guy Boothby, E.W. Hornung, Robert Barr, Arnold Bennett, William McHugh, O. Henry, George Randolph Chester, Frederick Irving Anderson, William Hope Hodgson, Sinclair Lewis and Edgar Wallace. And finally for today, a history book, the Richest Man Who Ever Lived. This is a book about Jacob Fugger. Yes, Fugger. By Greg Steinmetz. So Steinmetz is a former journalist and is currently at the time of this book's publication, was a securities analyst for a money management firm in New York. And this is interesting to me because this is the kind of guy who comes along and supplants the Hanseatic League, but he is the most successful, certainly, of his time. What I've read about the Fugger family has been in relation to the Hanseatic League, and I wanted to learn more about him. He is not well known. He is not, in terms of wealthy men, he's not almost mythological like Mansa Musa. He's not notorious like the Medicis. He's not a brain-addled idiot like Elon Musk. It's just something that appeals to me, something that's interesting, and something I really want to get read by the end of the year. And that's it for today. By the end of the next one of these, we'll have done the whole top shelf. So there's still a way to go. But I shall persevere. Until next time.